You're listening to The Adventuring Party, talking about gaming the Irish way.
Welcome to the party. I'm Owen.
I'm Liam.
I'm still Savage.
And I'm Warlord Scarr.
And today, much like the Javan Rhino and the blue-footed booby, the old GM is becoming a rarer and rarer sight at the friendly local gaming shop. Why is the GM's natural habitat shrinking? Why are the numbers declining? Why are they having less success in breeding and bringing about a new generation of GMs? Today on the Adventuring Party, the GM Crisis. So, Liam, where have all the GMs gone?
Well, it's always been a bit of a problem, everybody wants to play, but no one wants to run, and at a certain point somebody runs, and, people can get sick of running. It's nice to have a bit of switching up around the table, but it can be tough to get people to bite on it and do it, We've discussed at length at various times, like when you're looking at setting up a new campaign, what game to go for and methods of picking it. You can kind of hot seat your GMs and stuff as well, but, I guess we're probably more aiming at, this episode talking about, like, new players and new GMs coming in, are we? Or...
Yeah, we could certainly focus on that one because that is the main way we get new GMs. Because every time you get an influx of new players, with them you need an influx of new GMs, or you're just going to be cannibalizing the original GM supply.
I mean, I guess my main on the way back when everything was in black and white, and I think the way that you would get new GMs would generally be that players might be keen to take it up. And you could, at various times, people ran workshops with tips on like how to run a game and, what to do and ways to be familiar enough with the system. That would be one way people would get people in. There was also kind of a degree of mentorship, I guess. That you knew that there was experienced GMs there you could go to and ask, hey, I'm this kind of problem, like what can I do about it? What can I do about a problem player? I mean, obviously there are excellent podcasts out there in the ether now, but I think if you're outside of that kind of an environment, it can be quite difficult. Like in general, I think when people are learning new skills, it can be very helpful to have experienced people there. I know I wouldn't be in a professional context, I wouldn't be the engineer I am today if it wasn't for my boss, who's been a pretty good mentor. I think at this stage, I've surpassed him in a lot of specific areas of network engineering, but it's been great to have that guidance there to make me the engineer I am today. I think that can be tough for players if they don't have that there. Like it's out there, but where do you look?
Oh, let's just cut the chase. It's 5E's fault. They've killed GMs.
I largely blame 5E.
The monsters. They've done it again. They've ruined D&D since the last time they ruined D&D. This topic just sort of floated in out of the ether in the last couple of months. The last couple of weeks, in fact, where there were some big profile pieces in places like Don't Say Reddit, Boing Boing, crap. There's been... Did the New Yorker or someone do a piece on it? But yeah, there's this it's floating around the internet at the moment that it's where are all the GMs? Very hard to find them. Groups can't find them. It's the tagline for a lot of these pieces. New York City has a serious dungeon master shortage. It's not just New York City, by the way. It's just where it's more acutely felt because we have a subculture of
and you're sure it was
GMs.
You sure it was a gaming forum you were reading that on, and not?
There are a shortage of tops in certain other communities, but we won't talk about that today.
That's the problem I always have with the term Dungeon Master. I've always much preferred Games Master. Is like, but then again, some podcasts and stuff make it their own, like Dungeons and Daddies, not a BDSM podcast.
But yeah, you can't get a DM for love nor money, especially money, because on that side of the ocean, at least, people have started paying people to run games. Imagine. Shane.
That's a different topic for a different day, and I have probably bad opinions there. But first off, we should probably put our figure out the math is probably difficult in a situation where no one really prints actual numbers and 90% of the player base is invisible anyway. But the impression I've been getting is the theory, certainly the claim, is that the big D&D 5th Ed surge has created a vast blue ocean of players, but it hasn't created a commensurate proportion of DMs. Like, we've gotten all these new people who are interested in playing the game, but not as many people who are interested in running people. Everyone seems to want to be Tailson, and I don't actually know what people okay, this is me as a
wants to drive.
Everyone wants to be a critical role
I guess
darling.
the thing
Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah. Okay. I don't. This is me as possibly as one of the forever DMs around, and I'm happy to be so. I remember Matt Mercer's name, but I don't remember the names of the people who play in Matt Mercer's game. So but I suspect that there may be an awful lot of people who have their favorite actor in Critical Role, and I want to play characters like theirs. Whereas I just like, it's a cast. But Matt Mercer, he has his ideas, and I guess that's where for me is that like I basically started as a GM. I don't think I was even really in that many games before I just knuckled down and saying, right, I gotta do this myself. Every game I've been in has been crap, so I have to throw my hat in the ring to make a game. And this is when I was part of a game society. Like, I was in a game society, I was surrounded by gamers, but most of them had already filled up their tables, so I was sort of left on the few side games which sort of haltingly started and then died. And I was just like, well, I gotta start my own. And I started my own, and it was crap, but I stuck with it, and I became a seasoned DM by going through the trenches, by dying in the mud a bunch of times. But I guess a lot of people, and I don't want to say this is, damn those millennials and they're not wanting to do the work or anything. I'm just saying, in our modern society, we have an expectation that in the ancient, forever ago, black and white times of the early 2000s, technology was primitive, and of course the DM had to learn by failing a whole bunch of times. But now, in our bright, modern, warp drive future of 2020s, surely technology and human endeavors have created a perfect solution to instantly become an expert GM and run every game without any problems, and definitely not having to house roll half the stuff. And this has apparently proven not to be true.
Well, I mean, the thing is, if you were coming in the 80s or the 90s or the 2000s, how does someone start playing RPGs? You go to a convention, or you read about RPGs and you decide, hey, I'd like to give that a go. You buy a box set or you buy a core book and you read it. And the person who read it 90% of the time is the person who ends up going, well, I guess one of us has to be the games master. And this explains what the games master's job is. So alright, let's give it a go. I probably have nothing or a convention game to compare myself to. That's it. If I want to play this game, I must find 3 to 5 other like-minded people who'll play with me. And it's much easier if I say, hey, I'm going to run the game, than go, hey, will one of you run this? And you might go, I'll run this, and then somebody else will read the next game and run the next game for us, and that's how we're going to go. That was the route in, right? Nowadays, people watch Critical Role, and you see the characters doing stuff, and Critical Role is very character-centered. So logically, players are going to want, I want to be that character, I want to be this, bisexual disaster druid or whatever, and that's what they decide they want to play.
So they go, is this akin to, the sex education or schools being terrible and teenagers learning about sex from porn?
I'm not going to be as kind of pejorative as that argument is often deployed, that they're not actually learned RPG, but the way they're seeing role-playing games modelled, they're not coming to it from the back end. where they see how a GM... Because if you read the book will make some attempt to explain how to GM to you. Most books will, right? In the olden days, right? Most books would explain they will have a very hackneyed allegory to cops and robbers, except that we'd need rules. And they would go, this is what we do. And if they're a good game, they will have a starter adventure which sort of holds the GM's hand really well and explains to people how to use them. A section of the book that nowadays people start going, oh, this is a waste, this shouldn't be in the core book. And I'm like, it's really valuable. You don't understand how valuable it is, but it's really valuable. I know you can do it with PDFs now as a separate thing and it doesn't take a space in the core book, but it was super handy to have a very simple starter scenario that kind of held everybody's hand through it. And so that was where people kind of got their ideas from. Where if you go to Critical Role, you see Matt Mercer doing his thing, and you go, we should do that. I don't know how to do that.
So it's all filler, no killer. Sorry, it's all killer, no filler, should I say.
Yeah, everything's bad's been edited out. But it's also, you don't see the building blocks of running it. So you don't, it's not really modelled the behaviour that the GM has to do. So the players are kind of like, oh, I should do that. It's like going, I want to be an actor, I'll start out by watching Hopkins in his prime. Yeah, it might inspire you, but it's not going to teach you how to do anything,
doesn't Anthony Hopkins, I think he did an interview saying that the first thing he does every time he does acting is that he reads the script like 100 times.
He lets it roll around in his head until he's kind of comfortable with it, and then he starts to play with it. How would the character say this and stuff? So it's a really involved process that you see the end result of, not all the building blocks. Right? Okay. So you're coming in seeing kind of seeing a very polished, crucially edited content. And then you go, okay, we should do this. I've no idea how to do... The player stuff is mostly done on screen. Right? Most of it's done on screen. There's all this back end of GM preparation you don't see at all.
Yeah.
And they cut out most of the table running stuff. Let me see that ability. Let me see what that spell does. Okay. That doesn't work that way. You don't see any of that, right? All that stuff is cut out as being boring cruft. But it's actually really important day-to-day GMing stuff,
Depending on how close to raw you want to get, and that's not what these people are selling. Not to mention, the sort of the timeline for shaping players' and GM's experience you're describing relies on them only ever seeking out something like Critical Role. Whereas there's lots, you can go to YouTube and find lots of good GM prep tips. Sly Flourish guy does weekly or monthly prep sessions for the games running, so you do get to see the backstage nuts and bolts. It's not carrying a couple of million views, but the information is there, and we're assuming this perfectly spherical millennial gamer who will only watch the top note stuff and never digs any deeper, because we're making the old man fallacy mistake of saying, oh, they're not as committed, they're not as interested, they're not as devoted as I was at that age.
I don't think that. I think they're coming in a different way, so they don't get that same... They get a different foundational experience. Their first experience is not trying to read and parse a poorly written textbook. That's not their first experience anymore.
Yeah, it's
their
better.
First experience.
The starter box sets for D&D, not contained in the core game that you're told to go and buy, but they're great. The Lost Mines of Phandelver is a great module, and you learn a lot from... It's great at what it does, what it's proposed to do. It's not the Lord of the Rings.
An unacceptably large number of players get mulched on their first combat encounter.
Good. They probably deserve it.
The bugbear rolls a 20 and their character dies. No, you've very little counterplay.
We know early D&D isn't a good fit for the rest of the game, anyways. Start at level 3, folks.
Basically, but the
okay. So how does this feed into the shortage?
So you're coming in from different points. So GMs are often no longer the first player. Like in the old days, like if I read a book or Scarr read a book or Liam read a book, you're probably going to be the GM, right? Liam, when you started out, was it like literally I read the book and then I was the GM?
I came at it from a gaming society. I didn't start gaming until college, so for me it was like I gamed. I played at a couple of different systems, and I picked up the systems I played in, and then we might decide to start a new game or a new system. In which case, yes, you would read the book and then go at it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you were surrounded by fellow gamers. You were soaking in that. Oh, this is how our game went last night. Oh, this is the problem I have when I'm GMing. Oh, this new book is overpriced, but it's also got this crap idea and this great idea, and I need to paid €50 for the privilege of sorting through these ideas, and so on and so forth. So you were sort of soaking in that social context of people around you playing, and then you eventually got into the act of playing. And I say I would be relatively similar. I had read a bunch of D&D stuff before I joined Society, but it wasn't until I actually joined a college society and was soaking in that I really got the drive to play and to be a GM. Whereas I think the point is being made that a lot of people they're in a more hype-oriented, less practical sense of, oh, playing D&D is cool, you should play D&D, and they're in that sort of hype vibe, and they're in these, oh, this new supplement is cool, oh, this art is cool, here's the commission of my character. That's the environment they're coming up in, and it doesn't reflect the nitty-gritty of becoming a GM in the same way, because, it's all about, the hype rises to the top in the internet.
I think we're obsessed with this idea that people learn D&D off the internet, or are introduced to it first and foremost to the internet now, and I've a hard time giving it too much credit. It feels very much like we're mischaracterizing huge amounts of people who we don't know and haven't met. Let's talk instead about what the companies involved are doing to encourage or discourage being the GM.
All right, so we can take a look at Fifth Ed, which is the bogeyman. This one, is probably driving.
They're the worst.
Well, they're driving a lot of the new people are coming in via. Well, you could say they're not coming in via the internet. I think a lot of them are, but let's say that they're coming in and they look around for the most popular RPG, and the most popular RPG is Fifth Ed. All right, by some distance. So they look to play Fifth Ed, and if you go for one of the starter sets, what's going to happen is the game will hold your hand very well through the first session. All right? It will hold your hand very well through the first session. One of your players may get crit by a bugbear and die in the first fight, but other than that, they'll keep you going. Like, character creation is a breeze. It's really very simple. You can pick an array of stats, or you can roll your stats, and you put your character together, you roll a couple of tables, and that's it, your character's built. You've got, your choices are back then it was race, is it species now?
Yeah, they made it species.
Yeah, but in the starter books, it's still going to be race, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so like you're going to pick your race, and you're going to pick your class. And you're going to pick your stat scores. That's it, right?
Basically.
Yeah, because you don't pick a subclass or anything else like that until 3rd level. So you pick...
Unless you're a cleric. I think clerics pick at 1st level, but I can't...
On the GM side of it, what do they have to do?
Well, the GM has a bunch of pre-written stuff to read through, and often some box text to read, and some monsters to control, and it's fairly simple initially. It really is. I mean, it's the initial experience is simple. You read the book, you read the little pamphlet, you go, okay, we do this, this happens when they go here, and then the next place to go is here, and it prompts them when to make skill checks, and prompts them when to roll combat. It holds their hand reasonably well through the whole period. And then the starter box is over, and away you go. And then it's kind of the game, as from a design end, abandons you. It goes, off you go. It's your world now. Run with it, okay? And if you're a kind of burly, rough it all DIY everything myself GM, cool. You'll probably be okay. But the game is at no point going to help you. All right?
But, how many people are doing that versus many people are going, right, well, okay, we're done with that. Let's pick up Horde of the Dragon Queen or one of the other adventure paths and go with one of them.
It's always hard to say. I'd say a lot of people go for the pre-written stuff, but there is a lunatic DIY fringe to the hobby, which is very loud, which is everyone should be homebrewing all their own stuff. And I never...
This is my world. Well, in my world.
And I never run pre-published stuff. I only ever run my own artisanally crafted lunacy, to service my own kind of, fetishes and things that I want to experience as a GM. And there are those people around, right? But there's or the people are like, well, it's all centered around the players. So the players have to decide, I will craft my game to reflect what my players want, So there's always that element to it. You'll see a fair...
I've always kind of maintained that gaming is like... It should be collaborative. It should be collectively should be making those decisions. However, the GM does have a veto.
Yeah. Well, we could get... the old days, you had the Viking hat GMs who would be basically like, I am God, I am running this, I'm telling this story, and we will basically... I'm kind of in charge of what's going to happen. And then you've kind of...
I guess you're an educator yourself,
yeah.
So I guess you know the difference between teaching adults and teaching children.
Yeah.
I know myself from coaching the difference between coaching adults and coaching children.
It's functionally very different. I mean, if you are running a game for children, your choices must be very structured.
Well, I just mean in terms of even motivation.
Yeah.
Like, adult learners are generally self-motivated, whereas children are often there because their parents want them to be there.
It is true. There's a legal requirement.
You can't really compel adults to do anything, and same in the gaming situation, that it's difficult to compel your players, look, this is what's going to happen, especially if you do it all the time, because they're just not going to have it, they're not going to keep playing.
Yeah.
But, yeah, this is getting off topic.
But there is the old school GM was the GM is God and I will decide what happens in my world, And you have those guys still hanging around, and they're their own style of GM, and they will be very big into kind of homebrewing everything and DIYing everything. And I'm going to make the best version of this because I'm better and I know what I want in my game, and that's fine.
Are they playing 5th Ed though?
Some of them are, and not like huge numbers, but some of them are. You'll always have a couple of those people around who are obsessed with the fact that they understand the game perfectly, and they know what they want. They're going to go for it. So, what happens in 5th Ed when you get past the starter set? Well, you start to immediately encounter difficulties, because what are the starter GM questions that get asked? How do I put together a challenging combat is one of the early ones. Okay? Because you go, I want a combat that's tough, so the players feel like they have to put some effort in, but I don't want it to kill them. How do I design that combat?
Yeah, the guidelines are rubbish in the current edition. I'd contest they've always been rubbish. 4th Ed was slightly more mathematically rounded. But you're generally left on your own, and you don't have a lot of advice in the current printed edition, which we can compare to previous.
You can look at some of the ones, but the problem is that you can kind of grasp it around first, second, third, fourth level. You'll get away with kind of using the guidelines, but after that, it just completely falls apart. Right, completely. There are games who have a mathematically robust challenge system that operates at every level. So you can look at Pathfinder 2, and if you go, I want to start a challenging encounter. Okay, you can do basically spend a moderate amount of XP, and you will get a moderate encounter. Or if you want a more challenging one, you can do a severe. And if you want to kill your players most of the time, 50% of the time, do an extreme. And those results are replicatable. You get them.
Gotchas you need to look out for. Okay, this is a monster that throws a hell of a lot of will saves, and everybody in the party's got a terrible will save. But that's specific parties. As a general rule, yeah.
What's this got to do with the GM shortage?
What it has to do with GM shortages, if GMs don't feel comfortable building and running the game, you're going to get less GMs. And there's people are looking at, how do I build this, and go, do I use this challenge system? And they try it, and it doesn't work, and that causes them to back off. Oh God, I messed that up. When you didn't mess that up, the game just what it's given you is insufficient. So if the GM is not being given the tools to run the game, the GM is going to back off because it's scary.
I'll go one further. I think the way that D&D, that particular product, 5th Ed, is going, is actually trying to write GMs out of the equation, for the most part. By systematizing a lot of stuff, by leaving a lot of the... Oh, you could take it from two branches. There's let's make this more and more a reduced, easy-to-run game where we don't really need a lot of GM input. Because here's the set encounter. Don't worry about how it was calculated. It's already been calculated. It'll work. And here's some monster behaviors. Just these are the actions they'll take. This is it. And then play on the player side. Very, very easy to, as you said, come up with a new character and get rolling. But with less and less advice for GMs to actually use to run a game with their own Viking hat on or off, imprimatur, then you fall back on rules as written, which gives an awful lot of power to players. Look, I can move this far, I can do this many actions, my build says I can get this done, and we'll have on a perfectly flat battlefield, and we'll have no interruptions or complications from the GM, thank you very much, because they're not really supported in the way the game is taught or the system that's presented to run it. So after a while, GMs just sit back and go, well, I'm just kind of an elaborate calculator for this kind of fun ride the players are on. I'm not really feeling I'm getting much out of this, not even feeling particularly welcome as a motive force or as an actor in this system. I think player characters are given a huge amount of power and lots and lots of options. Options are being stripped away from the GM in 5th Ed to the extent I don't think I've seen in other systems at other times.
Well, I guess the whole thing is you can ignore any of that stuff, but you have to be comfortable enough to feel that you can ignore that stuff.
Yeah, which
for me, I think where there's a certain amount of peril with 5th Ed is that people are wary of the amount of rulings they have to make versus because the rules are very light. It's a system that's inherently relying on the GM going, yeah, let's go with that and see if that works. Which, if you don't have the kind of force of personality if you have a group that might be a bit tetchy and you can't enforce that ruling on your player, I think that can give a lot of new players pause.
And the pushback there is that you've got lots of players who have very clearly written rules about how their character works, assuming no other complications, and they can point to the D&D Beyond website and go, hey, I paid for the Blood Reaper class, it cost me $8 or whatever, and it definitely says I can do this stuff, so you're going to have to accommodate me now. Yeah, not fun for GM at all, and I think that's one of the main reasons. And tabletop are more sort of to the point, virtual tabletop battle mat play. Again, lots of definites on the table that the player can point to and go, I can definitely see that spot because we've got in-engine line of sight and lighting rules. I can definitely reach it because I've got a ruler that says I can get to exactly there, and I've got a cone that says I'm going to hit exactly these people, and we'll have no interpretation from you, Mr. GM. Thank you very much.
That is definitely intimidating for some GMs, but there's also stuff like let's say some druid casts animal summon in 5th Ed. What does he get?
Something good or terrible depending on the whim of the GM.
Theoretically, well, no, it's like
exactly.
Oh,
yeah.
It's one of those, right?
And it's like you get whatever. Do you get 20 pixies carrying sleep arrows? You might.
Every druid has taken a trip to the Royal Zoo at some point, or gone. Their background has that they went safarying and went up to the Arctic Circle, before they decided to become a druid, so they saw every animal. Because if you haven't seen it, you can't shapeshift into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I spent 5 years amongst befriending the venomous velociraptor tribes of Western Eberron, so I can just turn into this poisonous acid spewing dinosaur whenever I want. That was an actual thing from actual 3rd Ed.
I'll have you know, I was one of those druids that hung out with acid spewing velociraptors in Chult. Shedded to his divine shadow. So as a GM, you'll be asked to go, okay, adjudicate this, GM. How good is this spell? Now, let's say you go, okay, you get the pixies, I suppose. And then the player proceeds to trivialize an encounter with pixies. He casts a spell again. Does he get the pixies again?
We'll see. Conditional.
I
like the spell list in D&D. I have huge problems with a lot of it badly written. Nerf Fireball.
Oh, absolutely.
Death to
Absolutely.
Carthage.
But that's the thing the GM is then asked to kind of balance as they go.
Without any guidance,
And
really.
kind of navigate the difficult interpersonal discussions that involve saying things like, no, you're not allowed to do that anymore. It's bad for the game. By which it means you trivialize every encounter with stepping over a horde of sleeping bodies with your pixie kin. And then you have to fix that. Like, it also means that the writing in the game, they focus on natural language and they focus on basically simple language. Which means that the content is written in a way that is easy to write and easy to read and very difficult to mechanically interpret. Let's say I create a spell called A Farewell to Arms. And what it does is you cast it and the creature's affected arms fall off. They then animate and become animate and fall around attacking the creature they originally fell off. Spell done. And everyone's go, oh, that's so funny. That's such a funny spell. That's great. And then the GM or the player, GM casts on the player. And the player's arms come off. What happens?
They get very upset.
Like, do they go back on afterwards?
I have no idea. I haven't read the spell.
Yeah, but I know I just told you what the spell does. That's all the
tell me
text
much,
of the
mate.
spell.
What's the casting time?
Yeah.
Components? You haven't told me Jack. That's an idea. Ideas are 10 a penny. How's it work?
You know, but like, so you'll often have a spell written like that, and then the GM has to adjudicate after.
Where? Point to one. Hold on. Point to one. Where's their spell written like that? Anywhere?
Hold on. I could dig stuff up, but like Animal Summon is my big example. Basically, which just says it summons animals. You know, yeah.
All of the summoning spells are in fifth ed are like that. They're all tough. But I mean, the whole thing with that is like, I guess for me, when I was playing a druid in a campaign, I basically just didn't use those summoning spells because they weren't reliable. And if it's not reliable, then...
But they're not reliable because that's the way the
use.
GM interprets them to be not reliable. If another GM goes, yeah, you can just pick what you want, they're incredibly good, right?
Yep.
So I don't want to constantly be going back to the OSR is everything well that I sometimes go to, but there's a certain element of the rulings not rules idea that was injected into fifth ed that doesn't work so well. It works a lot better in an OSR game where the bad guy casts a spell on you and your arms fall off is way more legitimate in your 30 character sheets starting off game where characters are dying left and right. Yeah, whereas in fifth ed,
Easy come, easy go.
Again, some of this was unintentional, some of this was caused by critical role of things. It was like, fifth ed is a character-centric, character-empowering game where, let's say, like as I said in the previous episode, the game just is not designed with permanent consequences in mind. So having, horrible mutilation as a mechanic just doesn't make sense. And if someone wants to inject their ideas of natural language, arms falling off is funny, ideas into fifth ed, they're basically putting sugar in their gas tank. It doesn't. The rest of the game will fight them on this idea because it's so based around characters getting through to the other side that making permanent alterations to someone is actually probably going to sabotage the whole thing, and the game does not state that in its thing. It like, that's the thing. Like, there's, as I say, because OSR games work, we know that a rulings not rules game can work, but those games have breathless authors eager to expound the virtues of their genius game design, whereas fifth ed is just like, and this is the only way you ever need to play. But this is nothing. The only thing you ever need. Go forth, buy more books.
I mean, you say that, and to a degree, a lot of the permanent stuff has been removed, but like blindness is still there, isn't it?
Feeble mind.
Polymorph is still there. Like there's a lot of stuff. Lycanthropy is there. Curses are still there.
If you're looking at the published spell list, there's a lot of legacy stuff in there that needs a wild overhaul, but it would perhaps rob the game of some of its remaining whimsy. To your point, Shane, about the OSR, I came across a statistic that says something like 5% of D&D 5e players have GM'd, and it's closer to 45% of people who would self-identify as OSR players. I suspect that's some of it's being around for a bit longer. There being more variety of games to play in the OSR space. You're not restricted to just a WotC product. There's a whole bunch of other, some more derivative than other systems out there. Some more narratively inclined, some more sort of rules focused. Is it a case that one of the reasons, and let's keep cleaving to the point of this talk, the shortage of GMs as reported, is it that a lot of GMs just end up running games for other GMs because they can't stand players? Like, I know that if I started a game today, the majority of people I'd invite would be people who've either GM'd for me in the past or whom I know to have GM'd, and kind of understand some of the problems that remain behind the screen. Any thoughts?
I think ultimately your playing circle expands but slowly. And if you're sharing the duties within the group, you'll get a situation where everyone at some point has GM'd something. Or almost everyone in the playing circle is GM. There's often be a handing over of, okay, you ran the last game, I will run this game. Or he ran that game for a couple of years, he has to have a chance to play. So there will be that. The thing is, as well, there are people who are primarily players. And then there are people who are primarily GMs or kind of mostly only want to be GMs. Or don't want to GM for some playgroups. That they're happy to play with them, but they don't want to GM with them.
Yeah, there's also
you can look around. There are people
or
who will. I will
specifically that
GM this
player.
group. I will not play with this group. There are people like that, and there are times when people are like, "Well, I won't GM for this group, but I will play with them," and also the inverse. Yeah. Yeah, I will not GM this player.
We're all reflecting on that. Yeah.
You know, there is definitely that aspect to it. Like, the thing is there a barrier to getting into GMing?
Yep.
Right? There definitely is. You have to have a certain amount of kind of confidence in yourself to do it. And a lot of people are like, I'm really worried about GMing. There's a lot of people are comparing themselves to, like, not to harp on Critical Role this much. People are going on Critical Role going, oh my god, I couldn't be nearly as good as Matt Mercer. I'm like, you don't need to be as good as Matt Mercer. Matt Mercer is as good as Matt Mercer. Matt Mercer is A, edited, B, has the benefit of years of experience. Do not compare yourself to Matt Mercer.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Matt Mercer's first GM thing was just as terrible as anyone else's GM thing. It's just
the
like
Anthony Hopkins of our time.
Yeah, or whatever, like, but they're just someone you're watching and is being edited to his best advantage, right? Don't take that as his day-to-day performance, like it isn't, you know. Hopkins is so great. That's take one of 30, you know. You've got to understand that aspect of it. The second thing is, right, I once said this to someone. I said, look, don't worry about your first session. Really don't. You will over-prepare for your first session and you will have way too much done. I said, worry about your fifth session. Your first session will be way better than your third session and way better than your fifth session. Because you will over-prepare the first one like crazy, and then after that you'll get tired over-preparing it, and then you'll get in trouble.
Not to mention you prepared all the wrong stuff.
The first one is generally grand, because it's very close to what you intended to happen. The fifth one is where you're usually in trouble. You know? So get in, do the first one, and then come back for advice. You have, like, the trick in GMing is to let people get started, make them feel like they can make mistakes and get stuff wrong, and then come back and try again. And a lot of people are worried about failing, which is a perennial problem, but particularly this one where they're worried they'll get compared to other people, and they're worried about failure. So what they actually need to do is be allowed to fail and come back. A game that supports a player really well for their first GMing session is fine, but that's not actually where they need the help. They need the help some of the way in. And all of the help 5th Ed loads on you is for the initial burst, and then once players start getting subclasses and higher level spells, it abandons you and asks you to figure it out yourself, because the game stops balancing. So now the GM needs to deal with the fact that they're no longer in this predictable environment, no longer running something pre-written possibly. They're trying to manage all these other things, players developing in weird ways, their players' capabilities increasing, and they're trying to spin all these plates, and it starts to get overwhelming. And then the GM stops GMing because I'm messing it up. You're not messing it up. The game's becoming harder to run. Right? That's what's actually happening. It is the case in most games, but you have to be there to hold the GM's hand later on, right? And give us advice to how to handle this stuff, or simply don't create those problems. I had an issue in a Wolf game recently when one of the players, because of the mechanics of the game, could basically fight more or less a nearly infinite amount of the standard guard in the city. So the way it was going, I was deeply concerned that the player was going to fight an increasing amount of guards in the city, beating them all up. And I was going, what do I do if he beats up these 20 town guard now? What gets sent in next? And I said, do I start fighting an escalating guerrilla warfare against this city's guard versus this dwarf with a shield and an axe? Does this happen? How do I handle this? And I was like going, this is a real concern, because the player in question does not back down from threats. So I'm like, okay, what do I do to solve this one?
Sounds to me like he's bringing dishonor on his ancestors, so the dwarven elders of the town need to go have a chat with him, and if he doesn't respond they need to kick his head in. That's your
difficulty. But sometimes you're like, okay, I've got to strategize a way around the fact that in real life, if you try to fight 20 guys, no matter how good you are, 20 guys will get you. You know? No one's so good they can win against 20 other dudes. Right? But in RPGs, sometimes that's the case. That due to either mechanics or intentional, I can beat 20 guys, I can beat 40 guys, I can beat 100 guys, you know? A town guard are as nothing to me, you know? And, like, what do you do then? Like, those are hard GMing questions. Do you basically fight a guerrilla war against one players, or do you let the player roll through the town doing whatever they want? Right? Those are hard GMing questions. And that's ones that hopefully your game gives you options how to deal with.
I don't think most games do, though.
No, the murder hobo or something.
We're specifically harping on 5e, but I don't think most games do it.
It happens. Like, it's happened to me several times with that player in particular. But
that's something you as an experienced GM have had to figure out how to deal with and how to do it, but I don't know that you've ever received any advice from any system on how to handle that.
Oh no, relatively rare of that. But some systems, it won't. They'll have, okay, there are high level options for facing off against the player. Here's the level 13 guard or whatever, you know, or the equivalent. There are things you can, or there's here are troops you can use, whereas like this systemizes down 20 guys, puts them together and makes them one unit to manage, you know? There are tools there occasionally you use, like, there's no level 13, the 10 doesn't have a squad of level 13 fighters, but it has a level 13 troop, which is basically a bunch of guys just operating together, you know?
Barkeep dust off the sword from behind the bar.
Okay, let's wrap this up. Shortage of GMs. Final thoughts, folks. Let's go.
I think I'm even more confused than when we started. Why are people not GMing? I don't know. I think it's certainly an opportunity that WotC and all are missing out on, that they could certainly be looking at video series and stuff to tie in on how you could GM your first game, you know? There's a lot of advice out there. There's a lot of YouTube series. There's a lot of fine quality podcasts from the likes of ourselves that will give people specific advice on what to do. But has any of it been productized and pushed? I don't think so. I mean, the DMG is there, but that's pretty weak, I think, in terms of...
There's an entire episode into how different the 5th Ed DMG is from previous DMGs.
Yeah.
And of course our ongoing thing about the first Ed DMG, which is full of interesting stuff and absolute nonsense.
I don't know how much people... Even when you put it in something like a DMG, though, I don't know how much people actually sit down and read an entire book like that, though. I'd say it'd be few and far between. Like, most people will read a bit, skim it, and then come back to it as they need to.
Maybe. I said quite possibly future episode.
There are few enough technical manuals on the ancient art of DMing. As close as I've seen at the moment is, and I've harped on this one before, Sly Flourish's Guide to the Lazy Dungeon Master, full of useful tips. I was reading another one lately, but I can't bring it to mind, by a fellow. It was how to write a good written scenario, how to write a good published scenario, from a guy who's put about 100 of them.
Award-winning writer Gar Hanrahan?
It's not. We should ask for his advice. At the end of the day,
for me, I think if you're in some kind of society thing, I think that is really one of the best ways of doing it. And if you are in the likes of the Pathfinder Society or the ongoing Shadowrun groups or the Adventurers League for 5th Ed, keep an eye out for players for people in your players who would make a good GM or somebody who might be interested in GMing. Ask regularly and then try and court them, cultivate them, and get them to run and, offer honest feedback to your GMs as they start out, and if you are one of those guys starting out, then take the feedback and try and take it well rather than being offended. Apologies, Savage, I jumped in on top of you.
That's okay. Here's the bitter pill. DM work is creative work. Do you want to play guitar, or do you want to have the warm fuzzy feeling of being applauded for playing guitar? One of them is a fantasy, the other one is a lot of sitting around with boring books, boring exercises, and failure. And learning to play guitar and learning to GM requires hitting a lot of crappy notes on the way, but you will get there if you actually really want it. Make your fingers bleed. Doesn't matter what the other people say. That's me.
I think a big part of the issue is that as we've gone on, the gaming society, the hanging out in the gaming store, the being down with real people in the trenches to solve your DMing problems has been replaced by, I hate to harp on the old goblins, but like hanging out on Reddit and just asking Reddit GMs for their advice, and oh boy, that's another episode. But like I don't think there are less GMs. I think we have just had an explosion in players, and players with standards. Well, no, maybe not standards is the wrong one, but players with expectations. And we've gotten more GMs, but not proportionally more GMs. And I think the problem is that a player-focused edition of the game has survived for, 14 years now? And... No, 8? It's going on a decade, and it's set a course that just intimidates. It encourages players disproportionately to how it intimidates DMs. I think there are still new GMs there. There's just not enough of them. And it's basically it's a extrapolation of an old problem that we're not giving out tools for. And I think maybe the fact that this has arrived has something to do with like the death of things like Adventurers League. I actually don't know if I feel like Adventurers League has been de-emphasized a lot the last few years, and that might explain some of the GMing fall off.
Owen, wrap it up for us.
Well, we're short GMs. If you're a GM in need of housing or a player group or a book stipend to buy all those rule books you wanted to run the game for, please contact us at all our socials, our Discord, or wherever else you might choose to shout out and we might happen to overhear you. But for now, this party's over.
Thank you for listening to The Adventuring Party. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, you can head on over to SpeakPipe and drop us a line. Or you can join us on our Discord server, where we keep the party going after hours. Otherwise, you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, or Twitter, or you can email the hosts at party@theadventuringparty.net. The Adventuring Party is released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike version 3 license, but you probably knew that already. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and look forward to seeing you back here next week. Goodbye.